There are rare thresholds in time that do not announce themselves with noise or urgency, yet carry a gravity that quietly rearranges everything within you. And today is one of those thresholds. A moment that feels almost ordinary on the surface, but holds a depth that reaches far beyond what your mind can immediately process. And if you are here right now, feeling that subtle pull in your chest, that quiet recognition that something about this moment feels different, even if you cannot explain why, that is not coincidence, and it is not imagination. It is alignment unfolding in real time, something moving beneath your awareness that has been guiding you toward this exact point where you are ready to see something you could not fully see before you move forward. I want you to pause and notice your own presence in this moment, because what is happening here is not passive. It is participatory, and the act of choosing to stay to engage. To acknowledge that something resonates within you is already a step into this shift, not as a viewer, but as someone actively crossing into a deeper layer of understanding, because what is opening is not just information to absorb. It is an experience that asks for your awareness, your honesty, and your willingness to feel what has been quietly rising within you. And if you look back over the recent stretch of your life, you may recognize that something has already been changing beneath the surface. Not in a dramatic or obvious way, but in a subtle and persistent manner, like an emotional undercurrent that never fully disappears. A quiet tension that does not attach itself to one specific situation but seems to color everything. And maybe you have noticed memories resurfacing without warning, or emotions returning that you thought had already been resolved. Only now they feel different, more intense, or more revealing. And situations that once felt acceptable or familiar now carry a sense of discomfort that you cannot ignore, almost as if a part of you is no longer willing to participate in the same patterns it once accepted without question. And this is where many people become confused, because it can feel like regression or instability. But what is actually happening is the opposite. You are not moving backward, you are becoming more aware. And that awareness is beginning to illuminate patterns that were previously operating beneath your conscious perception. And what you are experiencing is the early stage of a karmic shift, where unresolved emotional dynamics begin to rise, not to trap you in repetition, but to give you the clarity needed to finally understand them. And that discomfort you feel is not a signal that something is wrong. It is a signal that something is ready to transform, because your system is preparing you for a level of awareness that changes how you experience connection at its core. And to understand this fully, you have to recognize that there has always been an underlying script influencing your experiences in love, a pattern that shaped how you gave, how you received, and how you interpreted the behavior of others. And this script was not something you consciously created. It developed over time through early emotional experiences, through the ways you were acknowledged or overlooked, supported or misunderstood. And it quietly taught you what love was supposed to feel like, even when that version required you to overextend yourself, to stay in situations longer than your intuition suggested, or to accept less than what you truly deserved. And for a long time, you followed this script because it felt familiar. And familiarity can create a powerful illusion of truth, even when it is not aligned with your deeper needs. But now something within you has started to question that pattern. You have begun to notice the repetition, the way different circumstances still lead you back to the same emotional outcomes. And that realization is not random. It is the beginning of your liberation. Because once you see the pattern clearly, it no longer has the same unconscious hold over you. And this is what this karmic window is offering. Not judgment of your past, but awareness of your present, showing you that you are no longer bound to the version of yourself that operated within those limitations. And the script that once defined your experience is now being placed in your awareness, not so you can continue it, but so you can consciously choose to change it. And what makes this moment so rare is that it creates a space where your consciousness expands enough to see beyond illusion, where you begin to understand love, not as something you chase or fix externally, but as something that is directly connected to how you relate to yourself. And as this shift continues to unfold, you may notice a new kind of clarity emerging, one that allows you to see situations with a level of understanding that was not available to you before, where emotional attachments that once felt overwhelming begin to loosen and you can observe them without being consumed by them. And this clarity does not disconnect you from feeling, it strengthens your relationship with it, because it shows you that the love you have been seeking was never meant to rely solely on external validation. It was meant to reflect an internal alignment with your own sense of worth. And as that realization begins to settle, you start to experience connection from a completely different place. One that is not driven by fear or repetition, but by awareness and choice. And that shift, even if it feels subtle at first, is what has the power to redefine everything that follows. There is a quiet intelligence within this moment that is not trying to push you forward, but gently guiding you back to something you have always carried, yet may have forgotten how to trust. And this is where the real meaning of this portal begins to reveal itself, because it is not leading you towards something outside of you. It is leading you back into alignment with a version of love that does not require pursuit, negotiation, or self-compromise, a version that exists as a natural extension of who you are when you are fully present with yourself. And as this realignment deepens, it may not unfold in a way that feels calm or easy. In fact, it can feel like an emotional unraveling at times, as if old sensations you thought had already passed are suddenly returning with unexpected clarity, moments of heartbreak resurfacing not to reopen wounds, but to show you what was left unresolved. Memories of giving too much without receiving enough, appearing not to blame you, but to help you see the patterns that once shaped your choices. And this process can feel intense because it asks you to sit with emotions you once moved past quickly, to feel them without escaping or suppressing them. And that can create the illusion that something is going wrong, when in truth, something is finally moving in the right direction. Because what your emotional body is doing now is releasing what it has been holding for a long time, clearing space for a different kind of experience that is more aligned with who you are becoming. And every wave you feel, every moment of heaviness or reflection, is part of a deeper process that is far more meaningful than it appears on the surface, because you are not breaking down. You are shedding layers that were never meant to define you permanently. And beneath that shedding, there is a quiet strength beginning to take shape, one that allows you to face what you feel without losing your sense of self. And that ability alone changes everything, because it creates a separation between your awareness and your emotions, allowing you to experience them fully without being consumed by them. And as this continues, something remarkable begins to emerge. A clearer perception of yourself that is no longer filtered through the expectations or reactions of others, but grounded in a deeper understanding that does not depend on external validation. And this recognition may not arrive with intensity or excitement. It often comes quietly, almost subtly, but once it is felt, it becomes stable in a way that is difficult to shake, and it starts to influence how you move through your world in ways that may surprise you. Because you begin to notice that you are no longer as willing to accept dynamics that require you to diminish your own needs, you begin to feel a natural resistance to interactions that once felt normal. And this is not ego asserting itself. It is alignment taking its place. It is the result of you no longer operating from a space of lack, but from a space of self-respect. And that shift, even though it may seem small in isolated moments, begins to ripple outward into every aspect of your life, influencing the choices you make, the connections you allow, and the way you interpret what others bring into your space. And this is where awareness transforms into something more tangible. Because there comes a point in every process like this where seeing is no longer enough, where understanding must turn into action. And that point is present for you now, even if it does not appear in an obvious way, because what is happening is an internal divergence, a quiet split between continuing familiar patterns or moving in a new direction, guided by what you now understand about yourself. And this is not something that requires a dramatic decision. It happens in the subtle moments where you pause before reacting, where you choose clarity over confusion, where you allow truth to guide you instead of comfort. And the power of this moment lies precisely in that subtlety. Because it does not force you into change, it offers you the opportunity to choose it, and each small decision you make in alignment with your awareness begins to shift your reality in a way that builds over time, creating a version of your life where your experience of love is no longer shaped by repetition of the past, but by the presence of who you are now. And as this becomes more real for you, you begin to understand that you are not being asked to become someone different or to erase what you have been through. You are being invited to step into your life with a level of consciousness that allows you to move forward without carrying the same patterns with you. And this invitation does not demand your attention. It does not announce itself loudly. It exists in the quiet pull you feel towards something more aligned, something that feels true without requiring effort, and you have the choice to ignore it or to follow it, to remain in what is familiar or to step into what is possible, because at this point your story is not fixed. It is open, and the way you move from here will shape not only the people and experiences that come into your life, but the way you experience yourself within them. And that is where the deepest transformation begins. Not in what changes around you, but in how you choose to meet it. As you continue moving through this opening, there is a layer of experience that begins to unfold, that feels deeper than emotion and more precise than memory. Something that touches a part of you, that recognizes without needing to think. And this is where the concept of soul memory becomes real, not as an abstract idea, but as a lived sensation. Because you may start to notice that certain people from your past begin to feel present again, in a way that is difficult to explain, not physically but energetically, as if their imprint has resurfaced within your awareness. And this does not mean you are meant to return to those connections or recreate what once existed. It means that there are pieces of understanding that are now ready to be completed. Threads that were left open are finally being brought back into your field so they can be seen clearly and released without confusion. And these connections are not random. They were never random. They were part of a deeper agreement that existed beyond conscious choice, what many would call a soul, contract experiences designed to activate certain patterns within you so that you could eventually become aware of them. And now, within this karmic window, those contracts are reaching a natural point of closure, which is why the emotional charge surrounding them begins to shift, because instead of pulling you back into attachment, it begins to transform into insight. And you may find yourself suddenly understanding why someone entered your life at a specific time, why their presence felt so significant, why their absence created such a strong impact. And this understanding does not come with the same intensity it once did. It comes with clarity, and that clarity begins to dissolve the emotional grip that once held you in place. And this is where the shift becomes undeniable. Because it is no longer about reconnecting or revisiting the relationship itself. It is about releasing the meaning you attach to it with a level of awareness that frees you from needing to relive the experience. And as this process unfolds, it naturally leads you into a deeper realization about the nature of the connections you once believed were meant to last. Because there is a type of connection that feels almost overwhelming when you're inside it, something that carries a magnetic pull so strong that it convinces you of its importance simply through its intensity. And in those moments, it can feel like truth because it is so consuming. But what you are beginning to see now is that intensity alone is not a measure of alignment, and not everything that feels powerful is actually stable or sustainable, because some connections are formed not through clarity, but through unhealed aspects of two individuals, recognizing each other, patterns, meeting, patterns, needs, meeting needs, creating a sense of familiarity that can easily be mistaken for destiny. And as this realization starts to take shape within you, it may not feel comfortable. In fact, it can feel like the foundation of your previous understanding is being shaken because you are being asked to look again at experiences you once defined in a certain way. But now you are seeing them through a different lens, one that is not influenced by the same emotional attachment. And this can lead you to revisit those past connections internally, not with longing, but with observation, noticing details you overlooked before recognizing moments where your intuition signaled something you chose to ignore, seeing where you extended yourself beyond what was balanced, where you held on to something that was not fully meeting you. And this shift in perception can feel disorienting because it changes not only how you see the connection, but how you see your role within it. And there may be a moment where you question yourself, where you wonder how something that once felt so real can now appear so different. But that questioning is not a sign of confusion. It is a sign of expansion. Because you are no longer perceiving through the same emotional filter, you are perceiving through awareness. And awareness removes the layers that once shaped your interpretation. It dissolves the narratives you created to make sense of what you felt, and replaces them with a clearer understanding that may not always be comfortable, but is undeniably true, and within that truth there is a freedom that cannot exist within illusion, because illusion, no matter how compelling it feels, always carries uncertainty. It keeps you analyzing, doubting, trying to piece together something that never fully aligns. But truth has a different quality. It grounds you, it settles you, even if it challenges you at first. It provides a sense of clarity that does not require constant questioning. And as you begin to anchor into that clarity, something shifts in how you approach connection itself. You stop seeking the intensity that once drew you in. You stop equating emotional highs with genuine compatibility, and you begin to understand that real alignment does not destabilize you. It creates a sense of steadiness, a feeling of being supported rather than pulled. And this is where the collapse of illusion reveals its purpose, because it is not taking something away from you. It is returning your ability to see clearly, your discernment, your capacity to recognize what is aligned and what is not, without needing to rely on emotional extremes. And as that discernment strengthens, you begin to move through your experiences with a different level of awareness, one that allows you to choose based on truth rather than reaction. And that shift, even though it begins internally, has the power to transform everything that follows. As this shift settles more deeply into your awareness, something begins to change in a way that feels almost unfamiliar at first, because you are no longer being pulled in the same direction by the emotions and attachments that once felt so consuming, and you can feel that difference in your body, in your thoughts, in the way you respond to situations that used to trigger you automatically. And as that emotional grip loosens, the urgency that once drove your actions starts to fade, replaced by a sense of space that may feel quiet, but carries a powerful clarity within it. And in that space, there is room for truth to emerge without distortion. Room for something real to enter your life without being filtered through past patterns or emotional confusion. And what you are beginning to notice is that your guidance is no longer coming from intensity. It is coming from stability, from something deeper that does not fluctuate with every external interaction, but remains consistent within you. And that shift, even if it feels subtle, marks the closing of one chapter in how you experience love, and the beginning of another that is rooted in awareness rather than reaction. And as the illusions that once shaped your perception continue to dissolve, something equally powerful begins to rise within you, not something new, but something that has always been present beneath the surface, something that was simply harder to access when your attention was consumed by overthinking and emotional noise. And that is your intuitive intelligence. And now, for the first time in a long time, you are starting to hear it clearly, at first in small ways. In quiet moments, where a knowing appears before your mind has time to analyze in subtle signals from your body that tell you something is not aligned even when everything looks right on the surface. In a sense of calm certainty that does not need explanation because it feels grounded and real, and this is not imagination or wishful thinking. This is your internal guidance system, recalibrating and becoming more precise as your awareness expands. And as that happens, you begin to notice that you are no longer influenced by words alone. You can feel the energy behind them. You can sense authenticity without needing proof. You can recognize when something aligns with you and when it does not, even if you cannot immediately explain why. And this level of perception does not come from logic, it comes from presence, from being connected to yourself in a way that allows you to receive information beyond what is visible. And in the past, you may have ignored this voice. You may have overridden it with reasoning or convinced yourself to stay in situations that did not feel right. But now, it feels different, stronger, more consistent, and more difficult to dismiss. Because it does not need to be loud to be accurate, it simply knows. And the more you listen to it, the more you begin to trust it, realizing that it has never led you in the wrong direction. It was simply unheard before. And this awakening changes the way you move through your life in ways that are both subtle and profound, because you begin to trust your initial responses instead of questioning them. You begin to make decisions based on alignment rather than fear or attachment, and you become less dependent on external validation because you no longer need confirmation from others to recognize what you already feel within yourself. And this creates a sense of inner stability that cannot easily be disrupted, a quiet confidence that allows you to navigate your experiences with clarity and intention. And as this clarity deepens, you also begin to understand something that may challenge the way you once defined love, that love and attachment are not the same, and that it is possible to release one without losing the other. Because in the past, holding on may have felt like proof of how much something mattered. The difficulty of letting go may have seemed like evidence of depth. But now you are starting to see that attachment is often rooted in fear, fear of loss, fear of emptiness, fear of not finding something similar again. And that fear can keep you connected to something long after it has stopped being aligned with your growth. And what is changing within you now is your ability to separate the love you experienced from the attachment that kept you holding on, allowing you to honor what was real without needing to recreate it. And this realization brings a kind of peace that softens the urgency you once felt, allowing you to look back without being pulled back, to appreciate what was without needing it to continue, to recognize the role someone played in your life without needing them to remain in that role. And in doing so, you begin to reclaim your energy in a way that feels both gentle and empowering. Because letting go from this place is not rejection, it is alignment. It is the understanding that something has completed its purpose, and that holding on beyond that point would only prevent further growth. And when you release from that awareness, there is no bitterness or resistance, only acceptance. And as that acceptance takes root, you begin to trust something deeper, that what is truly meant for you will not require you to hold on in fear, that real connection will not ask you to sacrifice your sense of peace in order to maintain it. And as this trust grows, you become more open in a way that is grounded rather than vulnerable, allowing you to experience connection without losing yourself within it. And this is where emotional freedom begins to take shape, not as a dramatic change, but as a steady shift in how you relate to everything around you. And as this process continues, you may start to notice something else happening within you. A return of energy that had once been tied to past experiences and unresolved emotions. A sense of clarity or lightness that feels almost unexpected. A renewed motivation that seems to come from within rather than from external pressure. And this is your energy coming back to you, no longer invested in patterns or connections that no longer serve you, becoming available again for you to use, to direct, to build something that aligns with who you are now. And with that return comes a quiet but undeniable sense of empowerment, because you begin to feel more present, more grounded, more connected to yourself in a way that does not depend on anyone else. And this is where a deeper realization begins to form the difference between seeking love and aligning with it. Because for a long time, love may have felt like something outside of you, something to find or earn or secure, often accompanied by a sense of urgency that something was missing. But now the perception is shifting, and as it shifts, you begin to recognize that love is not something you chase. It is something you align with through your own awareness, your own presence, and your own sense of worth. And that realization begins to change everything that comes next, because it transforms not only what you attract, but how you experience yourself within every connection that enters your life. There is a moment in this journey where something subtle yet undeniable begins to settle within you, and you realize that the urgency that once defined your experience of love is no longer driving your choices, because what is replacing it is not indifference, but alignment. A deeper understanding that love is not something you pursue through effort or control, but something that naturally meets you when you are standing fully in your truth. And that truth is not constructed externally. It is formed through your relationship with yourself, through the way you recognize your own needs, the way you honor your boundaries, and the way you choose not to abandon your own energy just to maintain connection. And as this realization deepens, your entire approach to relationships begins to shift in a way that feels both grounding and liberating at the same time, because you are no longer trying to convince or prove your worth in order to be chosen. You are simply present aware of what aligns and what does not. And from that presence, a different kind of connection begins to reveal itself, one that is not built on emotional highs and uncertainty, but on clarity, balance, and mutual respect. And this shift naturally changes what you are available for, because dynamics that once felt acceptable now feel misaligned, not because they have changed, but because you have. And instead of adjusting yourself to fit into those patterns, you begin to recognize that they are not meant for you, and that recognition is not rejection. It is refinement. It is the result of becoming more attuned to your own truth. And as you continue to move from this place, something powerful begins to happen. You stop experiencing love as something you are trying to reach, and start experiencing it as something that flows toward you, something that reflects the alignment you have created within yourself. And this is where awareness transforms into action. Because seeing clearly is no longer enough. You are now being asked to respond differently than you have in the past, to set boundaries where you once stayed silent, to walk away where you once held on, to choose alignment even when it challenges your comfort. And these choices are not always easy, because they require you to step beyond familiar patterns and into a version of yourself that is still stabilizing. But each time you choose differently, you reinforce that new path. You show yourself that you are no longer bound by old habits, and through that consistency, your confidence begins to grow. Not from external validation, but from your own ability to act in alignment with what you know to be true. And as this continues, you reach a threshold where the old version of your emotional reality can no longer sustain itself. And the new version begins to take shape, not through sudden transformation, but through gradual integration, where your relationships no longer define you but complement who you already are, where you remain grounded in your identity while allowing others to meet you there. And this is where a new emotional reality begins to stabilize, one that is rooted in awareness, authenticity, and self-respect. And even if it still feels unfamiliar, there is a steadiness within it that was not present before, a sense of clarity that replaces confusion, and a sense of choice that replaces reaction. And as this new identity continues to form, you may begin to notice that the way you process emotions, the way you perceive connection, and the way you respond to situations that once triggered you is evolving into something more stable, more intentional, and more aligned with who you are becoming. And this is not just growth. It is a rebirth of your emotional identity, where the version of you that once tolerated uncertainty now seeks clarity, where the version of you that once feared loss now understands alignment. And as this internal transformation stabilizes, it begins to reflect outwardly, because the energy you carry starts to influence how others perceive and respond to you, not through effort, but through presence. Because self-respect is not something you need to announce, it is something that is felt in the way you hold yourself, the way you speak, and the way you choose what you allow into your life. And this creates a natural filtering effect, where what is not aligned begins to fall away, and what is aligned begins to move closer. And this is not coincidence, it is reflection, your external reality mirroring your internal state. And as this magnetism strengthens, you realize that you are no longer attracting from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. And this is where one of the most important distinctions becomes clear. The difference between fear-based attachment and aligned love. Because fear-based love carries urgency, instability, and a constant need for reassurance, while the love you are aligning with now feels steady, clear, and grounded. It does not require you to prove your worth or sacrifice your peace. And as you embody this understanding, you naturally move away from anything rooted in fear, not through avoidance, but through clarity. And this clarity brings with it a new level of responsibility, the responsibility of conscious choice. Because you are no longer operating on autopilot. You are aware of your actions, your reactions, and the impact they have on your reality. And this awareness places you in a position of power, where each decision becomes an opportunity to reinforce the life you are creating, allowing you to move from reaction into intention, from external influence into self-direction. And as you continue to make choices from this place, something begins to stabilize within you. The shifts that once felt uncertain become integrated. Your energy becomes more balanced. Your sense of self becomes more grounded. And this is the stabilization of a new timeline, one that is shaped not by unconscious patterns, but by conscious alignment. And within this space, you begin to experience a deeper sense of peace that is not dependent on external validation, but rooted in your own internal consistency. And as this stability strengthens the connections that enter your life, begin to reflect this new level of alignment, bringing interactions that feel more natural, more balanced, and more authentic connections that do not challenge your worth but recognize it. And this is where your experience of love transforms completely, because it is no longer something you are waiting for. It is something you are living through, the way you treat yourself, the standards you uphold, and the energy you bring into every interaction. And from that place of wholeness, love becomes an experience rather than a need, something you engage with consciously without losing yourself within it. And this is where everything converges into a single realization that you have the ability to shape your emotional reality, not by controlling what happens around you, but by choosing how you show up within it. And as this karmic window closes, what remains is not the intensity of what you felt, but the transformation it created within you, leaving you no longer at the beginning of your journey, but fully within it, actively choosing, actively becoming and moving forward with a clarity and self-respect that will continue to guide you into everything that is aligned with who you are now.